giving up your time on your oh, there I am. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving up time on your Saturday to be here. I have just one or two orders of business, which is please be sure to sign in. If you didn't sign in on your way in, we've got those sign-in sheets, or just wave at Trudy, and she will make that possible for you. And if you are watching at home, we do not have a capacity for you to vote this morning. So that is correct. So we appreciate you watching, and if you have questions or concerns, we'd love to hear from you, but we just don't have the mechanism to make that possible at this moment. So, all right, but thank you again. Let us pray. Almighty God, we thank you for all the many resources that you have given us. We thank you for each day with which we are blessed, and we thank you for the call that you place on our lives to serve you and serve others. We ask that you bless our work so that many more may know your love and your mercy. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Grant. And a couple things as we do the call to order. I'm the presiding elder. It's how the Methodist Church works, so I was asked to do that and given the permission to do that by a superintendent, kind of that process. Also uniquely, some years ago, the Methodist Church went to typically district charge conferences. Some of you were at the district charge conference at the end of November. That's where a lot of reports and things are given at charge conference. And so many churches don't have a separate one like we're having now. It's only through district. It's all presented there, approved there, and basically the votes that kind of carry where we're going to go are by ad board and finance committee and all our other committees. So you're probably aware of that. I just want to make that clear. And we made the decision to add this charge conference, or this church conference, this time of the year for a unique reason. We wanted to wait until the end of the year to really get our budget together. Such a unique season that trying to find principles of past or last years are difficult, so we wanted to really see where we were. And so that allowed us to really work on the budget with more clarity where we were not only at the end of the year, but also in January. Also gave us more time for nominations, a few other things as well, and so we decided to have this. Also be alert to the fact that often at church conference we share goals, next steps. That's tomorrow at 11 o'clock, and together all our services come. That's where the next steps are going to be shared, and we're talking. And the budget is certainly here, and all that is a preliminary to those next steps. So they're all connected together in one journey together to move where we believe God's taking us as a church family. So I wanted to get clarity on that. So we call the church conference to order. You've already heard about the roll call of getting your name down, and now we need to elect a recording secretary. So, and I think Trudy's willing to do that. And so would somebody nominate Trudy for that? Because if you don't, you have to do it.
I nominate Trudy.
That's right. So just by acclamation, Trudy is the recording secretary, which means basically she puts down about the votes we did and how they ended up. So, well, first, we want you to look at the leadership process restructuring. Let me get the paper here. This conversation has been going on quite a while in our church, this leadership restructuring. It's not a terrific change. It may seem like it is, but it's really not. It's simply a way to process together leading our church in a little different way, more of a large church way. And so we've done some of that. This has been through all the committee chairs. I've had conversations about this process. We've also had that decision processed through ad board as well and approved unanimously. And so we simply need to bring that to you as kind of a restructuring. Nomination reflects that some. We'll talk about nominations in a minute. But the major things I'd like you to see about this online and in person is the ad board really kind of morphs. It's not going away. It just morphs into an executive lay staff leadership team. And this is simply a model that many churches are using. It's not something unique or special. It's been tweaked for First Grapevine. And so it's really kind of where we're moving, and it works better. Process is simpler, a little less heavy. I'm not criticizing what we're doing now, have a great process, but it's a little bit heavy for staff and lady to work together and get where we're going to go and need to be. So we're trying to make it a little bit more nimble, more user-friendly. We know more clarity about who's doing what, and so that's kind of what we've done with that. And so we go on to executive lay staff leadership team. A lot of folks that are on the present board would be same positions on that one. And so just be alert to that being kind of a leadership team, less than a reporting body. A leadership team that includes certainly approval processes, which we already have with the ad board, but we kind of move forward more into this kind of arena together, and allows, I think, key staff and laity to work together and a conversation to allow us to move forward as a church on a month-by-month basis. I think it's a model that's not been untried, and so just be aware of that. Finance and stewardship team continue as they have. Stewardship team will be a standing committee rather than approved by church conference, because that is not necessary really to do that. The finance will be approved by church conference, and it'll be similar to what we've had with that accountability process, budget planning, all that kind of stuff. Another significant change is that the staff parish relations committee goes to pastor parish relations committee. Now be aware the church had that for a number of years. Some years ago that was shifted, just during a lot of changes here going on here, felt the need to have more of a comprehensive body. But the role of SPR in that is just really, really difficult it's difficult to do just because of the demands and expectations and resources. And we need to applaud Julie for doing that in this last year. HR, hiring staff, working with communications, working with the pastors, processing changes. It's been an amazing year for that committee to work and share. So thank you, Julie, for that. We are blessed by her willingness to do that. We want to move that now to more of a PPR committee, which is simply a model that churches and organizations use. I may talk too much, but I want to make sure I'm answering questions before you ask them. Where you have the pastors in this case have a direct connection with the PPR committee. That's who we're accountable to on a consistent basis, long been the case. And beyond that, the superintendent who supervises each one of us individually. And so we have two kind of connections there. If you're a subordinate PPR, then you also have a senior pastor who supervises you too. So you got lots of supervisors already in that process. But then we have the structure where people supervise others. Someone supervises the children's person who supervises their staff. And so everybody has a supervisor. We all work together, and everybody can still appeal to special cases to PPR committee, even if they are subordinate staff and are not in the category of pastor. And so that should work pretty well and also require hopefully less effort for lay people. Now my sense is, just to give clarity to you, I believe that laity must lead a church, must be in positions of authority and accountability for all of us. And that's essential nature of being a congregation. So I understand that's the case, but also we want to make sure that our laity also can serve God and worship God and serve in the community and invite new people to come to church and work in programs and ushers and greet and work with children. We want them to have freedom to do that. So I have a little philosophy in my head. We don't want all our best people running the church, then who's going to grow the church? So we want to really kind of balance that. And the word balance is the key component, that we can be effective as a congregation. And so I'm hoping to get us where we can just have a process more nimble and focused, and we can do that together. I pray it works. It should, and I'm familiar with it. So my familiarity is teaching other churches to do this in our conference. So that's the role I had immediately before I came here. So I have some connection with that with large churches. And even though we're not as large as we were, we operate like a large church. We have vision of a large church. We have programs for large churches. We have a large church mission. I mean, this feels like a church of 1,000 people attending when it comes to what we do. And so this will help us be able to achieve our goals. So I want you to see what that is. Okay, trustees continue as the same, and they're typically meeting disciplinary requirements, property, all that kind of stuff. We do add a Life and Mission Council. Life and Mission Council is not an authority body, but it is a body of influencers and leaders in our community and our church. We put together in a room, and we share maybe 2, 3, 4 times a year, depending on the year. We come together, and there's where conversation, consensus building, community connections happen. We invite people on that group, and that's still to be populated. That's a much larger body that comes together. It takes the place of any kind of town hall meeting at other places where we can simply talk. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we need. Here's what you need. Here's what we're hearing, whatever it might be, and help us stay on track with a community vision. It's It takes everybody to do that. And so that might include someone who may not come to church very much, but they're a community leader. And we want them here to be able to have a conversation about how we can interact with you, whether it be a hospital or school system or city, whatever it might be, and have that relationship there with them. And then, of course, our church as a whole, young families, older people, everybody in the same room, and we'll populate that, and that's all approved by the ad board, so we have, or the executive lay team when we get to that point. Nominations continue, stewardship, endowment fund committee continues, lay delegate annual conference, community building. These things are not new, but the last thing that might be significant is the missions and outreach of our church, which we shift from council and ministries to more of a leadership structure style. Now, we're blessed at this point, which is relatively new, having a full-time pastor who's working with mission and outreach, Alan Lutz. And so Alan will work with our committees and our leaders and the teams and missions, work with you to help us really have a more refined process, connect with each other, do the budgeting, communications, all that stuff, without knowing who do I meet with, where do I go, what do we do. And it also saves a layer of people meeting that may not need to meet necessarily, which is the old council ministry structure. I'm very familiar with council ministries, which has a lot of value, but I don't know of any church anywhere that uses CO council ministries as a model. It's been long since passed, not because it wasn't effective, but because we model new things when we get into the world that's changing. So those are all, and these are all been approved by the ad board. And so we're here in this shift, and I explain the shift as much as I can. So we think it'll work. If we don't like it, we can go back to another system. We can morph it, we can change it. Nothing is in stone. Structures, budgets, nomination leadership, everything we do all serves the church and the church's mission. We don't serve the budget, we don't serve nominations, we don't serve structures. They serve us. And are we achieving our mission? Are we reaching people for Christ? Are we serving our community? Are we reflecting justice in our world? Are we doing the things the church is supposed to do? Those are the questions we ask, and we try to find a system that will help us achieve what we're really here to do. And so those are all key ideas I want you to have today. So any questions about that? And again, it's before you, and I'm going to ask for a vote that we move forward with this. Again, ad board has already approved it unanimously, which was, I think, says something as they explored it in much more depth than we might be able to do here today. No questions? Then I have it before you. Yes?
Is there any change of the term limits or the process of people being appointed to the committees?
Right now, the names I have here all have term limits. Now, I have a feeling sometime that we don't always follow term limits in a way when people go off and we think they need to stay. So term limits will continue. I do envision down the road we might shift that some in some of our committees, not all of our committees. But at this point, term limits still are in place. I just don't have that on the nomination sheet. And that's a good question. Yes? How do I see Steve Ministry in leadership? Steve Ministry is a mission ministry of the church, and we continue to do that like we do with so many other things. I don't, how it fits in the leadership structure, it's a separate mission that operates like villages operate, those are a great question, villages operate, like children's ministries operate, like all our programs operate. It's just mainly volunteer-led. That's unique about Stephen Ministry. So, hope I answered that question. And I hope this all gets us to where we can spend much more energy in refining how effective we are in all our areas we do. We have a lot we do. I mean, we do a lot as a church, which is what our heart is. We do a lot. And so how can we make everybody be supported, everybody find a way to serve and as God calls them to serve and do a good job in those arenas and work with our pastors and staff and everybody else and getting that done. Good question. And it's before you? Yes, Bruce. Okay. This came from the ad board committee, so it does not need a second. All in favor, just say aye. Aye. Okay. If you're against when you leave, write a note and say, I'm against this. I'm just joking. So, I think that was acclamation enough. Okay, we'll say it passed. I never thought that having votes that was if 34 and 4 against matters. Now, you may think it does. I don't want to break any rules and find myself, you broke a rule, you're going to hell now. So, okay. I think we're good. And we will adapt. If things don't work, we will shift it. Again, I can't say enough how budgets, structures serve our mission and our vision. It's not the other way around. And sometimes when we get things written down in stone, concrete, that becomes the primary leading part of the church, and that usually doesn't end up where we want it to end up. So we're in a good place, I think, at that point. Okay, then we have approved that. Now, nominations follow that. Now, nominations are not complete. I'll save that for about a second. But you have that before you as well around the new structure. Now, some of the groups that lead now don't have to be approved by charge conference or church conference. Stewardship team, for instance, those folks, that is a team we've created to serve a need of the church. And so that team serves the church. Right now, it's been structured past through, I think, charge conference votes, but it's not necessary. We have a number of things that are like that. There are teams that are created. They serve the church and our mission. They're flexible. We can move people in and out of those teams as we need to throughout the year. The leader can do that to get to a more effective place. So we really have some teams we have to have through charge conference that are here, like the lead staff and PPR and finance. These things really have to be in place, and trustees. So, and lay members of the annual conference, endowment committee, these things are all important, and also nominations and leadership development. And so we have those in place. We do have some suggestions for nominations to add to that group. We'll do that in just a second, but I just want you to see those names. If we spelled something wrong, just give us a note and say, you spelled my name wrong, or I know they spell their name differently, or they're dead, don't put them on the committee. That's just a joke again, too. I don't think we have any of those. Annual conference, I've seen that sometime where that does happen. They'll have names, but but we're not doing that today. So these are the leadership. Lead together, we unify together, we serve together, and these are simply people who represent us around these particular areas of ministry, which I think are helpful and good, and so we have those before you as well. We'd like to add some names, and I believe, Trudy, you have those names that we thought could be added as suggested to. Normally, nominations comes from the floor of the charge conference. We've not done that in the past few years because we've not had a church conference. Where we're together, we can do that. We simply, here's the names we're suggesting. But we do have some suggested names, and I'm looking for, where'd she go? Oh, they're in the back. I've seen her at church sometime, and she's always at the back. Because she's hiding from everybody. We're going to ask her questions. You can watch everybody, too. So what are the names that we came up with we thought might be good, or somebody else have that? I should have bought that. I thought we're going to have those names in here, but we're trying to get all this wrapped up yesterday. Let's do it like that.
We couldn't hear what you said.
Okay, we're looking for the names we suggest. So I can pull up my phone here and get it, but I think that well, you had. Let me. Have people that are watching online decided enough of that? I'm going home? No, you're already home. You can't do that. That's, again, funny to me. If you're like me when I was dating my wife, Rhonda, that everything I said was funny. She laughed day and night. And then somewhere it went to eye rolls. All of a sudden, there was no more laughing, just eye rolls. And I asked her about that. She said, well, you said it before. I've heard that before. Nobody else is in that circumstance at all, I know. Yes. I'm sorry? No, I'm talking about we looked at some names and we suggested some of those as just a nominating committee. So thank you, Pam. Yes, I'm thinking about the names to be on the nominations committee, nominated from the floor. I'm looking. Okay, Ed Crater was a name suggested. Who else? Cecil. Julia, H-O-S-H? Okay, who else? James, will you lead us in a song? No, don't lead us in a song. I'm just kidding. Not that you couldn't do it. Oh, I said James. I get James and Jason. Their names back and forth all the time. They start with a J. I probably called James Jason more than I've called you Jason too. Of course, I don't know the name of my kids either. They get who now? Susie Guckle. Debbie Edrin. Now, those are 5 names that, again, we nominate from the floor. We bring suggested names. If there are other suggested names, we certainly can be flexible with that here from the charge conference floor. It's 5 on the nominating committee. Nominating committee normally meets just a couple times a year, unless you have some reason to do that. And most of the work there can be done by email if it's just like one person who we need to replace through nominating committee suggestions. Nominating committee works I'm the chairperson of that, and so that's kind of how that process works. Then if we don't hear anyone else, so Ed and Cecil and Julia and Susie and Debbie are suggested names to be added to nominations of leadership. None have been asked, so we'd have to say, will you do that? Yes? Yes, do you have anybody? Give us her names. Julia Strickland. And what's the other name now? Oh, Addie, yeah. Addie's been painting around the church lately. If you haven't seen the children's area now, pictures have gone up around the entire children's area of kids and families. Some painting is being done as well on the entry areas to kind of revive that and make it more welcoming. We're also going to work on the doors, the entryways there with some other things we'll talk about during the budget time we think are going to be nice and make it more welcoming to families and children. So we're excited about some of those changes. And Addie's been doing a lot of that painting back there, just been there with paintbrush doing that for us. So thank you. Okay, then Julia Strickland and Addie Payne. Certainly happy to add those. No one we take off is going to be sad that we did. We've not asked them yet. And so I'm thinking about who you think might be happy not to be here. Anybody hear this name that'd be happy not to be here? I don't think anybody be nominated is here. So how about we just take Ed off? He does everything already. He does. I mean, really, Ed is a full-time staff person here. I don't know what we do. Bruce put the pictures up. He came down there and put pictures up that you see on the walls in that area. Look Sunday at those pictures. It's such a welcoming, living presence of living stuff. And I think it's the first step of many steps we hope to take to address the needs we have in children and youth areas. So, okay, so we take Ed off. Who else might we take off? Want to take Susie off since Dick's already doing a lot of stuff too, or? Okay, we'll take that off, but we'll have them as reserves if somebody else says no. I don't want, so that gives us enough names to get everybody. So that's before you then. So nominations before you. I would like to ask also in our vote to approve this, that we allow the nominating committee and those who work, and myself as chairperson, to work with any holes we have, any additional names. We'll bring that back to the executive lay team when that time comes. Certainly includes some holes we've not yet filled. One here, one there. We have several. We're waiting on phone calls back to say yes or no. And so we're still waiting on those calls. And they said, I could have some more time. So we weren't able to get beyond that. And then we also have the Life and Mission Council, where we'll put in those names. And that'll come back to ad board. So if your vote to approve the nomination list will also include that. Yes.
On trustees, you got picked up listed twice.
Is he listed twice? Well, he told me to list him. He told me to list him twice. I've got to be on there twice, or I don't want to do it. I'm kidding. Well, let's take the one title off. So.
He's also on finance.
Yes, he's a representative from the trustees. That's how they chose to do that. And we may look at that some too. I'm worried a little bit that some of our chairs SBR chair may have too much to do. But we'll talk to her and see what she thinks about that. And we need to, we'll adjust that to make sure that we have jobs people can do. Thank you for that. Then that's before you as well, and that comes from a committee, so doesn't need a second. All in favor? Okay, I didn't hear enough non-ayes to warrant the noes. Now again, if you are no, let me know. We will make sure that you're recorded that way in our minutes. I don't like to make people feel uncomfortable, and that's really good then. Okay, well, praise the Lord that we're where we are. Now we have time for our budget and supplemental budgets. You have received that as well when you came in the door. Now I think folks mostly know, and normally our budget's been given to the charge conference there in November, so you're seeing that in a way you may not have seen it before. There are certain things we don't share with everybody, not because we don't want to be transparent, but some of those things are related to personal salaries and just personal stuff for some of the staff. I don't mind my salary being shared. I'm happy for people to know what that is, but we prefer to take those folks and not have that to the whole world would know about it. And right now the whole world would know about it. So if you have any particular concerns, you can address us individually, and we're more than likely to say, here's what this is. But we just don't want to do it in a public setting. But most of it's available for you to see. And so we're going to present the budget. Now I'm going to lay the foundation for it for you. And then following that foundation, we're going to have Steve come up, and Bruce's chair be available as well to help to share the details, answer questions you might have. We'll have some slides on that one for those. So if you're online, we hope you'll be able to see that budget online. Now, I do have an idea about the budget serves the congregation, so keep that in mind. I believe it's how we fund, it really should be called the way we fund our life together, rather than the word budget. Budget's not a bad word, but a budget does have a connotation of maybe it's not necessarily the term we want it to be, but here we have that, so want that in mind. Now, please note that in our budget, we do have some increases in some areas, which raises the budget up, higher than we might want to have done. We worked really hard on the whys and wherefores of it. Again, already been approved by the Ad Board and the Finance Committee, all by unanimous votes, both of those groups there, so we have that in our minds. So that when we looked at all of this, we were thinking the most high leverage stuff we need to do, where we need to spend most of our time in the next year praying COVID is going to eventually, hopefully in the next month or two or less, not be an influencer on our life and mission, which it has been for a long time. There's some areas we would have relaunched already. We ended up getting shot down by COVID. And my belief is, if you have an important initiative and you try to push it in a bad season, it's going to fail. So wait till you think it can succeed. And we hope we're going to be able to succeed in those things this year. So we picked some of those areas around two places. One's the basic budget itself, which is what we have to spend. The other is a supplemental budget, which we could have called wish list, but we didn't. Supplemental budget is simply work that has been done by staff and leadership where we need help. We want to get there. Here's where we're going together. And rather than waiting to the last minute, we've already done the work, already done the praying about it, already thought about it, already talked to staff. Here's where we think we need to be successful. And there's some primary areas we feel like are the most important to be able to get where we need to be. Now, some expenses we have are necessary no matter what. We got to do it, got to pay the electricity bill, those kind of things. But we really felt like that we needed to put some small but significant amounts of money in the children's areas, meaning people and kids, and student youth areas, meaning people and the young people. We felt that was an essential part of where we're going in family ministries. So we want you to think like that. We picked things we thought were high leverage, would make the most difference, help us achieve our life and mission together, get where we need to be this year. With my own personal feeling, we can't fall back anymore. We're not in a place we can do that. We have got to move forward as a church in this season. Now, we can't wait till next year or see how it goes. That's why those numbers are going to show that. But the supplemental budget has to be approved by Finance Committee and executive team before those are going to be spent whenever that happens. Now, also some more good news with that, and that supplemental budget, by the way, kind of initiated with asking our children's and youth staff primarily, what do you need to succeed? We asked all our program staff that same question. What do you need to succeed this next year? Give us reasonable numbers, you know, and they did that very well. Worked hard on that, brought that to us. Here's what we need to succeed. And so that's pretty much a supplemental budget with some small numbers in the overall ongoing budget as we've done in the past. So we really addressed it in all those areas so we can move forward. And I know we have lots of feelings about staff, but a lot of we're understaffed for our vision. We're understaffed now we're not understaffed to maintain what we have now, what we're doing right today. But we don't want to keep doing what we're doing today. We want to move forward in all the ways that's required for our vision, our mission, numbers, worship numbers, children, youth, families, growing and regrowing our church. I'm going to keep talking, so I'm going to stop. But that's really what we want to do in those areas, so we keep that in mind. We add to that the last quarter of 2021 was really a praise the Lord quarter. We had no idea what was going to happen. We had COVID come back twice. We had September, oh no. Then we had Omicron come toward the end of December. And we had some great moments in that season, some great weekend worship times. We had Christmas Eve, praise the Lord, turned out really well. We had a lot of people here that we had seen for a while, and that was real good. But the last quarter was, if I remember correctly, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the last 6 years, it was the number 2 best quarter in the last 6 years. So the quarter was really good. So we had 3 months of giving. We thought, that's pretty good. You know, and so that allowed us to put some money in reserve, some other things as well. And so we're excited about that number. And so it's not just the money that came in, it's saying people are committed, they're giving, they're happy where we're going, they are connected, and we feel like that gave us some positive sense to say, let's do something, we think we can. January giving, we're convinced we're going to meet this budget you have in front of you this January, meaning the numbers are going to have come in January. Now, my own experience is, and here I understand it might be different, my own experience has been January is not a strong giving month in my own life in ministry in other churches. So that's been my experience. So usually I expect, save some money in December because January is going to be a stinkeroo. And that's not been true here this January. So we pray that as some indicator, we have hope of meeting a little larger funding of our ministry outreach and our mission. So that's good. And that allows us to take the next steps, we believe, to say, approve this budget as it is. So those are important things to see. We also applied for 2 grants from the conference, actually from the Center for Church Growth, Evangelism, and Mission, which I was the lead for 4 years. So I'm very familiar with that center. And we have already received $10,000 for our new, begun several weeks ago, Spanish language service on Saturday night, which is running about 30 people. And we have 2 Wednesday night Bible studies that are also Spanish speaking that are going pretty well as well. They have almost as many for those. And so we're happy about that. And they're funding that for the next few months, maybe 6 months, depending on how we spend that $10,000, because that involves the salary, some other things. It's not expensive. It's mostly the salaries for Lily and Jesus Molina, who are leading that for us. And so come on Saturday night, 7 o'clock. They'd love to see you. I went, we're welcoming. Now, you won't hear any English. It's Spanish language only. It's not bilingual, so please note that. But you'll recognize some of the songs they're singing. And so come and support that. We also received, this is also praise the Lord, a $50,000 grant, which we're very excited about. That'll come quarterly this year. That's going to help fund some of the things we're going to talk about tomorrow at 11 o'clock. And so, and these things are especially targeted in a really, this is much more significant stuff we hope to do, again, to address young families and children and youth. And not that we don't care about everybody else, we do. That's where our losses have been the last 3 or 4 years. And so we really want to begin reaching out to this community, the neighborhood, those who used to go here, maybe they might come back, and figure out a way to find a place where they'll connect. And I do know this, absolutely, to reach new people takes new stuff. It just does. There's all kind of reasons for that, no matter what they are, but that's really true. New things reach new people, so we're trying to do that. You'll hear more about that tomorrow at 11 o'clock, but we have those 2 grants helping us with it as well. Those are all good news things, and we're happy about it, and we think that allows us to be more positive about increasing some of these numbers. And I'll add one last thing before I give it to Steve, who says, if you'll quit talking, I'll get up there and I'll talk. So he talks as a business manager. I talk as a hopeful, Lord have mercy pastor. Grant us a miracle. We're having faith. You know, God is big enough. I believe all those things. So that's part of my conversation as well. But I am convinced of this. This year is so important that if we don't really move forward in these areas this year, we may not get a second year to get where we need to be. I mean, we'll do great church, we'll worship, we'll serve, we'll be a good community of people loving God. That'll all be there, but will we be really where this church's vision already is? I found quickly when I came here that I did not have to say, these people don't have a vision. Well, they do. They have a mission and a vision, and they have a hope, they have dreams, they have expectations. They have to create any of that. That's already here. That's unusual. Usually it's not. You got to start from scratch. You're already there with that. It's just how are we going to do it? That's really the question, and a budget is a key part of that. And if you have no questions to ask, well, you can ask those later, but I'm going to go ahead and give that to Steve to share. And for those who are patient online, you'll see some things on the screen that will help you with some more concrete numbers. Thank you, Steve.
Good morning. All right, now the fun begins, huh? Numbers. I appreciate y'all taking the time to work through this as we talk a little bit about what we are excited to see, that vision that Mike has just laid out for you, and I think that's really the key focus that drove this year's budget and its development. So if you want to take a look up here in the next slide there, please, Marshall. The key drivers for this year's budget are really threefold. This is a full year of operation. Last year, we really weren't operating full scale for the full 12 months, really more like 9. So this budget incorporates those additional 3 months of operating activity that we didn't have last year during the COVID period. Certainly, the middle one is probably the most critical, and that's the growth strategy that Mike just laid out in terms of our need to focus on children, youth, the Spanish ministry, and our outreach ministries to those that are unchurched or underchurched. And those are critical elements of both the operating budget as well as the supplemental budget that's been presented here. And last but certainly not least, and Mike touched on this as well, and that's just momentum. We've seen in the numbers for that second half of the year, and in particular in that fourth quarter, and here into January, that we are seeing giving strengthen and build. It's come from a variety of ways. It's not just looking at one or two key people or groups of people. It's coming from across the board. We're seeing more required minimum distributions. We're seeing larger lump sums beyond pledging. We're seeing people who hadn't given at certain levels giving more. So God is blessing us in so many different ways in the giving area, and that's being reflected also in our plans for going forward with this budget. So yes, you will see in the revenues as we get into that, that we are stepping up and looking for an increase in revenues of about 8% for the year overall. So with that, why don't we start with the revenues, the receipts. Go to the next slide, please. That larger presentation that you saw, I think, was a little busy with all the months, so I've collapsed it down into just the year looks. So you'll see in the far left here the total budget for 2022 for revenues. We're looking at about just a little under $2 million for total offerings and $2.2 million for total receipts. If you compare that to last year's budget, that's actually a little less, a little more than last year's overall, but actually a little less in terms of offerings. So I think we were trying to be a little more conservative from our original budget. In terms of actuals, we were at $1,840,000. So yes, we are certainly stepping beyond kind of taking the most conservative approach would be to try to mirror what you did last year. I think what Mike hit it on very clearly, and that's in order to grow the church, you have to have that growth reflected in how your giving plays out as well. And so we are taking a step of faith here in, I think, strategically identifying where we think we can see growth in our giving, and we'll be taking approaches to help educate and communicate those opportunities for our congregation. I think as you look at the last few years, it's kind of been interesting that we've had some giving that just came out of the blue sky. I know one year we had a $34,000 gift that came from an online viewer who's out of state. We've had several of those that have occurred. So can you count on those happening every month and as an ongoing giving? No, but part of having an online presence and being able to share your worship and your ministry activities will eventually and is starting to show fruits of that effort. And we're building on that social media and that virtual digital ministry presence and platform that we're building as a church, and it's bearing fruit. So something that's also been kept in mind here as well. And certainly on the supplemental budget side of the revenues, we've mentioned the grants, but we're also recognizing that we're really birthing a series of new worship services and groups, and they'll begin developing their own giving associated with those congregations that come together for those particular opportunities. So incorporated into the supplemental, which you'll hear more about tomorrow, includes a service on Wednesday nights, a service on Sunday nights, and another service on Sunday mornings. And part of that will also include an expanded effort in online service as well. So all of those new growth-related initiatives will translate in some form into offerings and revenue giving. And we've taken our best efforts to identify what we think those will be throughout the year. Certainly on the miscellaneous side of receipts, you've got, when you open back up as a facility use, we're going to have more people being able to come and use our facilities, which translates into building use fees. We still are having weddings. We still have funerals that have opportunities for some revenue. So we've kind of kept a core amount there. The largest item that you'll see there, which is under other, happens to be the lease of our steeple for Verizon. And that's where that revenue comes from. And it's part of a long-term lease, and we've been getting that amount with an inflationary increase every year since that lease was established. Then last but not least, we've taken a slightly different approach this year in terms of presenting what really has been happening for years and years. And that is we have a series of designated funds that givers who have a specific passion for some element of ministry or mission activity have given to different aspects of what we do as a church. And so what we've done is in the transfer section, we've now highlighted that as a transfer from the designated into the operating budget. So we're actually aligning, let's say somebody has given to the children's ministry, and that ministry activity is being developed and documented in the operating budget, then the transfer of those gifts into the operating budget to cover those children's ministry activities. And that would occur with any of these other designated accounts that we've utilized in developing this line item of the budget. And of course, the grants that Mike mentioned earlier would also flow through this as well. So with that, any questions that I could help field on the revenue side of things? Yes?
On the transfers to and from designated funds, that line there,
Yes.
so are those funds that are on that line coming from these
From the balance sheet?
liability accounts on the balance sheet?
That's correct. For those that aren't familiar with how fund accounting works in a church environment, we have an operating budget, an operating account, and we have a designated account. The designated account are designed under fund accounting to specifically hold those gifts like endowment or children's ministry or missions, whatever it is that you've chosen to give above and beyond the operating budget, the general budget, goes into one of those accounts. And then throughout the year, as those needs develop for a particular mission or ministry activity, we will tap those accounts and use them for those designated purposes. So yes.
So then the expenses that would be anticipated to be covered by
The
those
ex-
amounts
They would be in the operating budget for that particular ministry area. They would be covered, they're covering the expenses that are outlined in a particular line item of that ministry. So if it's children's ministry or tweens or youth, then it would flow into those, it would cover those expenses.
very good. Thank you.
Sure. Trudy?
And in that those transfers are in a prepaid budget.
Oh, yes, thank you for reminding me. I left that out. The lion's share of these transfers is actually from prepaids. So each year, ahead of the actual fiscal calendar year, we get gifts for the next year. So in this budget, those transfers, there's a $66,500 amount of prepaid giving that was done in November and December.
But once again, they're reflected on the year-end financial statement?
Yes, it would appear as in the designated accounts, there would be a prepaid account where those monies were placed at the end of the year. That's correct. Sure. Thank you, Trudy. Good question. Any others? All right. Why don't we move on then to expenses? Marshall, if you'll take the next slide, please. Trying to make it a little easier to see. So, as with any church, the largest expenses are associated with personnel. So, we'll touch on that briefly. Our personnel budget represents about 59% of our total budget. That's been pretty much falling within a 58 to 60% level of our total operating budget for the years I've been here and well beyond that. So, that's pretty typical for a church our size doing what we do. The key things that are part of the personnel cost this year are really providing some increases for staff that have not had them for several years. So we, as part of our kind of hunkering down during the pandemic period, we did have to step back and not give some increases as we would like to have. And so we'll be looking at reinstituting some of that for those that have been without an increase for several years. We've also added one small piece of a music-related person in this budget. That's about a $2,000 to $3,000 item. That's the only other really added personnel item into the operating budget. The rest of the personnel-related costs that we would like to add are back to what Mike was talking about. It's part of the supplemental budget, and they're designed to address those growth opportunities that we see critical needs for. Examples would include we would like to have a welcome and greeter person supporting our children's ministry and tweens folks as they come in for check-in on Sunday mornings. So that's a key part of what we're looking at to do there. We are an assistant for the youth area. So again, all centered around the growth strategy, around children and youth. Other than that, we do have also, again, because of the shift from 9 months to 12 months of operation, and the fact that we had some staffing turnover last year. So that last year's numbers don't represent a full salary and benefits component for those staff. So now that we have the core staff that we have, hopefully they'll be here for the full 12 months, and we'll have a full allocation of both their wages and salaries as well as their benefits. In 2021, that was not the case. We had some periods where we had people who had left to go do other things, and obviously, in some cases, it takes several months to fill the roles, and in the meantime, those dollars were not being spent in 2021. But this budget does represent full salaries and full benefits for those folks throughout the year. Yes?
Total benevolences, would that be apportionment?
Yes, that is the other word for apportionments, but yes, in our...
Another word that I was trying to figure out.
That's right.
Besides apportionments, there's another word that the conference uses. Mike, do you know what that, I can't remember what it's called.
There you go. Yes, that line item that you see for 75,000, that is the apportionments component for this year. As we move on beyond the personnel side and you just look at the core increases in other areas, the primary ones are going to be in the ministry and program areas, as we were talking about earlier. In order to fulfill what Mike's laid out as our vision for the year, is that it needs to translate into having a full year budget for those program and ministry areas. Otherwise, you're not able to do what God's calling us to do, to meet the needs and attract folks to the church with young families and children. So that to me is a critical part of this budget as well. Yes?
On benevolence or compassion, the connection giving.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I thought we had a fairly significant contribution we made towards that in December.
We did. That's been our typical practice, is that our year end is very strong relative to the rest of the year, and so our largest funding occurs typically in December for benevolence.
Yeah, it lists 86,000, but I thought we just gave 101,000. No, we're looking at total 2021 actuals.
Let's see.
No, it wasn't 101,000, and that was total, year-to-date total. We gave 70,532, I think, at the end of the year.
Yeah, what they're referencing is that if you look under 2021 actuals, we have 86,232, which represents the benevolence component. And the question is whether that number should be a different number. I'm going to have to go back and confirm that. I don't remember right off the top of my head.
Look at the year-end financials that the finance department approved last week. It's showing slightly more than $100,000 on that portion.
Yeah, I think it was like 101 was the number that came to my mind. Correct. So that may be a typo on my part, so I'll have to go back and confirm that, but my recollection was like 101,000 and change. So,
In fact, in that regard, it looks like there's a number of amounts that you have showing in the actual for 2021,
okay.
which differ from what the finance committee was presented the other night and was approved by the finance committee.
What I may have to look into is I may have cut and pasted an earlier version of the year end, and that's probably what may have happened here. But yeah, it was 101,000, I do remember that. And so my apologies, I may have done a cut and paste here and just put the wrong set of numbers in that column. So my apologies. But thank you for bringing that up. You're accurate, that's 101. Okay, let's see. So beyond the programmatic increases, another one that I just was going to point out is for church facilities. You'll see that is also an almost $60,000 increase. And again, because of the pandemic period, we did a bit of we slowed down some of our maintenance. We didn't do as frequent enough because we weren't using the facilities. We didn't have a need for that full year of traditional operations. So some of this is a bit of catch up in some of our HVAC and systems maintenance work. It also incorporates increased custodial costs because we're now going to be operating for the full year. So a lot of those costs that are associated with being in full operation are also part of that year-over-year increase. Other than that, I think debt service may be another one to kind of point out. We had gone to the conference, or TMF, and they allowed us to continue to operate on an interest-only basis on our sanctuary loan. So this budget reflects an interest-only approach. Certainly, as the year progresses, if we feel like our financials will provide, then we will revisit that and look for an opportunity to pay down some of the principal. But to create flexibility from a cash flow and operating standpoint, we asked them, and Mike approached them to make that approval, and they did. So that's what this budget represents. I think those were the key. Oh, security. We did. Historically, we have been very supportive of security for our clergy staff and congregation. It just had all been reflected in the designated account for security. So this year we have set up a general ledger account within the operating budget, and you'll see here total security of $11,725, and that represents a typical year of what we have been spending on security for worship services.